Welcome back outside Gillette Stadium this time. My name is Mike Petraglia, joined as always by Patriots expert columnist for WEEI.com, Christopher Price. All right, Chris, just behind us, they're getting ready for the Winter Classic. The Patriots have, of course, concluded their regular season home slate. They will finish up with 2 road games, 2 AFC East road divisional games, and one this weekend, of course, against the New York Jets, following week just after New Year's Day against the Miami Dolphins. But this week, it's all about the Jets, and certainly it doesn't take a genius to determine which team is more desperate coming into this game. It's the New York Jets. They're 9-5, 4-game winning streak, and they really feel as if they have got a legitimate chance for the playoffs.
Well, you're looking at a Jets team right now the rest of the way that will fundamentally be playing playoff games because they need to win out, or at least in theory they need to win out, because you have 3 teams going for 2 spots, really. And you look at what the Chiefs have done over the last, 8 games. They're 8 in a row. They won 8 in a row. You look at the way the Steelers are playing, and then you look at the Jets. So the Jets are going to have to do their best to keep pace. When you look at the schedules that all 3 teams have, the Jets have the least favorable schedule. So this is a must-win game for New York. The Patriots, they're playing to clinch first-round bye. They've already got the first-round bye. They're playing to clinch the number 1 overall seed. So there is a lot on the line for both teams. But as your point's very well taken, the Jets are a desperate team right now. They need this victory.
All right, and if it's the Jets, it must mean another running attack type of storyline coming through Foxborough. How to stop Chris Ivory. He certainly did some damage. But the Patriots, I thought, in their first meeting back on October 25th here at Gillette, the 30-23 win over New York, were able to mitigate that somewhat, not let Chris Ivory really get downhill, and Bilal Powell. I thought on both of them they did quite a good job. And if I recall, early in that game, Ivory got dinged up.
Ivory did get a little bit dinged up. I will say this. Powell, for me, is probably the most intriguing puzzle piece when you're talking about the New York Jets offense. He didn't face him the first time around. He's a multidimensional threat, maybe the best multidimensional threat that this team is going to face, and that includes old friend Shane Vereen. He's a guy who can beat you out of the backfield. He's a guy who can beat you on the ground. He's not the first read for Ryan Fitzpatrick, either in the air or on the ground, but he has the skill set that can really become a headache for New England if they don't pay attention to him. So I think that when you're looking at this New York offense, obviously they're that old school ground and pound kind of Rex Ryan feel with Chris Ivory. They mix Powell in a little bit. They go to Brandon Marshall. They go to Decker. Those are really the 4 fundamental elements here when you're talking about offensive skill position players from New York.
Had a chance to ask Nick Mangold, their multiple-time Pro Bowl center, about the ground and pound, and I asked him exactly that question. Rex Ryan, your previous coach, was all about ground and pound, but he told me that, look, we're still offensive linemen. We want to be physical, and being physical means running the ball, establishing the run.
Yeah, I think that really ultimately, and you could take some of these elements out of the October game between the 2 teams. The Jets really looked to run the ball. The Patriots loaded up. They committed to stopping the run. They did a really good job against Chris Ivory right up until the point when he was injured. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the Patriots try the same focus this time around. Last time it was Logan Ryan going up really for the most part against Brandon Marshall, with Devin McCourty offering help over the top, and Eric Decker and Malcolm Butler. It worked for him. I wouldn't be shocked if they decided to go with the same process this time around.
Let's stick with the running back theme, and that is, of course, the newcomer that everybody's talking about here in Foxborough, and that is Steven Jackson. He arrived yesterday, on Tuesday, I should say, for a walkthrough, but his first real media introduction to New England was on Wednesday, and he said this was the perfect Christmas present to be here in New England with old friend Bill Belichick. Obviously, their days go back to way back in 2004 when Belichick visited him in college or after college in one of those pre-draft visits. And Belichick has always had a great deal of respect for Steven Jackson. And here on Wednesday, he said his record speaks for itself. I guess the question I have for you, Chris, is how much can we realistically expect to see Steven Jackson contribute on Sunday in New York?
I think you're going to look at a guy who really at this stage of his career is a situational back. And that's not to say you're going to limit him to one kind of style or another, but if you get 10 to 15 carries out of him for 4 yards a carry, and you work in Yosefa, you work in James White, you work in Brandon Bolden occasionally, maybe 2 or 3 touches, I think that is going to be the basis of your running game going forward. Look, he's not Steven Jackson, the same guy he was 3, 4, 5 years ago, but I think it was interesting to hear Bill talk a little bit about Steven Jackson's relationship with Josh McDaniels in the single season that they spent together out in St. Louis. And I think the fact that he does kind of have a little bit of that shorthand when you're talking about similarities in the offensive side of the ball, I think that's going to play really into his favor.
You are writing about this on WEEI.com, Chris, and that is, don't expect just because you have Steven Jackson here on the roster for the Patriots to attack them on the ground. As a matter of fact, just the opposite. First time around, it was Tom Brady throwing the ball 56 times. They only ran the ball 9 times. 4 of those were by Tom Brady himself. So why is it, and you're writing about this, why is it we should not expect any change in the way Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick attack the New York defense?
Because there's a point of diminishing returns when you're talking about going up against the New York run defense. They're the second best run defense in the league. Over the last 5 games, the Patriots have averaged about 15 carries a game against the Jets, leading up to the October game where they had just the 9 carries for 16 yards. This is not a formula for success against New York. You can beat them. You need to have a quick tempo. You need to get the ball out quickly. One of the things that really stood out about that October game, now granted, the rosters were not completely different, but the rosters were different. Yeah, the injuries and personnel moves have caused the Patriots to kind of, do a little bit of shuffling, but at the same time, it's important to note that the snap-to-throw time, the average snap-to-throw time for Tom Brady in that October game against the Jets was under 2 seconds. I think they're going to try and do the same thing this time around.
All right, let's talk about the Pro Bowl. And a point that I asked Belichick about here on Wednesday was the fact that they have 7 Pro Bowlers. What does that say about your organization? And you know what he said? He said it really speaks to the pride we take in homegrown talent around here, and it really means something. I think not just to Bill Belichick, but that's his way of tipping his cap to the scouts who work so hard to watch these guys in college and project them at the pro level.
Yeah, I think it's a tribute to the scouting department. I think it's a tribute to the front office that all 7 guys who are, not just the fact that they had 7 guys named to the Pro Bowl, but 7 guys who are all homegrown talents. Talking to some of the guys in the locker room about it, Stephen Gostkowski, Matthew Slater, Malcolm Butler, it's a point of pride for this franchise that these guys came up through the system here in New England, made their bones as Patriots, and now they're getting a little bit of national recognition because of it.
I don't think there's a classier guy, and you know him very well, Chris, than Matthew Slater in that locker room. And he had an interesting point when he was told that Bill Belichick brought up his dad, and he said, you both have 5 Pro Bowl appearances. And Matthew Slater had his dad's back, and he said, well, actually, technically, that would be 7 for my dad and 5 for me. And the point I'm making here is that Matthew Slater said, quote unquote, if I could play 13 more years, I won't be the player that my dad was.
Yeah, that was a nice moment to hear him say something like that. And, Bill Earl also brought up the fact that, he coached Clay Matthews, and now Clay Matthews Jr., or Clay Matthews III, I believe, right, is also a Pro Bowler. So it's a nice little tip of the cap to the Slater family, to the hard work that Matthew has done since he's been here in New England, the fact that he gets to go to his 5th Pro Bowl. He is a guy who is, look, we're Matthew Slater apologists, quite frankly, but he's a guy who is the best in the league at what he does. He's a guy who deserves to make that trip. If the Patriots end up, losing before the Super Bowl, and if they end up having to go to the Pro Bowl, it's, like I said, it's a nice tip of the cap to a guy like Slater.
Obviously not what they're about around here. Let's talk about what they are about, and that is trying to wrap up a number 1 overall seed. Like you mentioned, Patriots 12-2. The urgency, we know it's there for the Jets, but how do the Patriots approach this game? Namely, guys like Danny Amendola and Dante Hightower. Do they play? Should they play?
I think that you have to monitor them one way or another. It's a fine line that this Patriots coaching staff is going to be walking when you're talking about this game, because you want to focus on winning. This is an important game. All 16 games are important, but this is an important game because you want to wrap up that number 1 seed sooner rather than later. You don't want to go down to Miami with that still hanging in the balance. I think at the same time, we've talked about this before, momentum versus health. Health trumps momentum every single time. And so you want to make sure that those guys are as close to 100% as possible going into the postseason. The Edelmans, the Amendolas, the Hightowers, right, those guys, they can play, but you don't want to blow them out. You don't want to run them out, for 100% of the snaps. I wouldn't be surprised to see Edelman sit, maybe Hightower play in the same sort of system, depending on how the knee feels, that Gronk had when he was first back. Yeah, I think it was just over half the snaps. You're going to manage the snaps. You're going to manage the workload for these guys, but it is important that they get some work between now and the start of the postseason.
This may be one of the few times that we actually think that the Patriots might lose a divisional game. Your thoughts on what's going to happen Sunday?
I think New England ends up winning this thing. I think that at least history tells us that whenever they go to New York, more often than not, they figure out a way to make it work. whether it's last year, they got a big special teams play, Vince Wilfork with a blocked field goal, whatever the case may be. I think they're going to find a way to end up coming out with a victory this time around as well.
Any big Christmas plans?
No big Christmas plans other than going to New York for a couple days. It's all good. How about you?
Spend time with the family, rest up. It's all about getting your appropriate rest at this time of the year, Chris.
Health versus momentum.
We can bring the best Patriots coverage possible to a rabid fan base, and I think that's pretty safe to say, throughout New England and throughout the country and throughout the globe who follow us on WEEI.com. We are very grateful. I know I can speak for you in that regard for all of the attention that is paid to this team, and we're very lucky to be able to bring a lot of it to you. So here's wishing a very happy and safe Christmas and holiday season to everybody out there inside or outside Gillette Stadium as they get the rink ready inside. He is Christopher Price. I'm Mike Petraglia, WEEI.com.